How did YHVH become the God of Israel, the patron deity of Israel? The encounter between YHVH and Israel is described in the biblical texts in different ways, and these texts do not agree on the place where this link was first formed. They do agree on certain things, I'll point that out, but they don't agree on the place where this link was first formed. Exodus chapters 19 to 24 gives us one account. Here we are told that YHVH became the God of Israel following his revelation on Mount Sinai through the conclusion of a contract or a covenant. During this theophany, the Hebrew people heard the voice of YHVH in the midst of thunder, and he communicated to them the 10 commandments, the 10 sayings. Then, because the people could not tolerate this proximity to the divine, they asked Moshe to become the mediator between YHVH and Israel. YHVH in this narrative, Exodus chapters 19 to 24, presents himself as the God who conquered Egypt. Exodus 19. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, on vulture's wings, and I brought you to me. He then announces his name to all the people, the name that up to this point he had revealed only to Moshe. When you come to the Hebrew side or the Israelite side, the Midianites knew his name, as we've demonstrated in our last video. Exodus 20. God spoke all these words to respond. I am YHVH, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. The new revelation between YHVH and Israel is then ratified by a ritual in which Moshe sprinkles the people and the altar with blood. This story of the theophany at Mount Sinai, like the narratives of the calling of Moshe, retains the memory of the fact that YHVH had not always been the God of Israel. This relation or relationship is the result of a particular encounter. Okay, so this is what we get in Exodus chapters 19 to 24. The prophet HOSEA also has his take. In the book attributed to the prophet HOSEA, we find the simple claim that YHVH found Israel in the desert. Hosea 9. Like grapes in the desert, I found Israel. This is Hosea's take on when the connection is made. The prophet Ezekiel also has his take. Like I said, the encounter between YHVH and Israel is described in the biblical text in different ways. Ezekiel, according to Ezekiel 20, according to the prophet Ezekiel, the story of YHVH and Israel began in Egypt with a choice by YHVH. Exodus 20. And you shall say to them, so says YHVH, Elohim, on the day I chose Israel, then I lifted up my hand to the seed of the house of Jacob, and made myself known to them in the land of Egypt, when I lifted up my hand to them, saying, I am YHVH, your God. On that day I lifted up my hand to them to bring them out of the land of Egypt, to a land that I had sought out for them, flowing with milk and honey. It is the glory of all the lands. So the mentioned texts, all these texts that we've just mentioned, do not agree on the place where the link was first formed. But they do, however, agree that YHVH chose Israel at a particular point in history, and that this people had not been his people from all time. It's extremely important. This statement, this conclusion, leads us to think carefully then about the name Israel and its meaning. What can we say about this name? When and under what historical circumstances can we imagine this meeting to have taken place? What do we know about the name? Can we investigate it? Israel, the name Israel, contains the theophoric element El. This can be understood as the proper name of a deity, El, who is known in Ugarit as the creator God, or the head of the pantheon, or the head of a pantheon. But it could also, in certain cases, be used as a generic term for God. Now, the etymology of the name Israel is a subject of controversy. In the book of Genesis, the author of the story about Jacob's struggle with a mysterious entity who eventually reveals himself as God proposes an etymology. This is what we get. Genesis 32. And he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, because you have commanding power with God and with men, and you have prevailed. Look at what is in the parentheses. An angel of. No. Because you have commanding power with God and with men, and you have prevailed. The same explanation is given in Hosea chapters 12. Before we go there, this etymology is a folk etymology. What does that mean? It is a popular but mistaken account of the origin of a word or phrase. So the etymology proposed here in Genesis 32 is a folk etymology. It's not historical. The same explanation is given in Hosea chapters 12. Some text has it at verses 4, some has it as verses 5. So I think the Masoretic text and then the LXX have it at different verses. So Hosea chapters 12, verses 4 or verses 5, depending on your text. In the womb, he seized his brother's heel, and with his strength, he strove with an angel. This is also a folk etymology, a popular but mistaken account of the origin of a word or a phrase. This etymology construes the name from the root Sarah, which means to hit or combat. In theophoric names, the name of the god is the subject, not the direct object. In this case, then the primary sense of the name would be, may El or may God combat. This root, Sarah, is attested in the Bible only in the two texts that we just cited, in Genesis and Hosea, Genesis 32 and Hosea 12. Other suggestions have been made. What are these other ones? The other suggestions are that the name can be construed from the root yasher, which means to be just. This would be a construction in the affirmative conjunction, which is El is just. El is just. This root, yasher, is found again in two poetic texts in the book of Deuteronomy, which affirm what I'm saying. Deuteronomy 32, and Jeshurun, or Yeshurun, Yasher, became fat and rebelled. The biblical text uses this name for Israel, if you're wondering what it is. Now, the issue here is that the vocalization of the name Israel in the biblical text speaks rather in favor of a name constructed in the preformative conjunction. This line of thought opens up another possibility, namely the explanation of the name by reference to the root sur, which means rule, govern, command, impose oneself as master. The name then would mean, may El impose himself as master. Let him reign. May El impose himself as master. Let him reign. The Hebrew Bible has perhaps preserved, a trace of this meaning. Hosea 12. In the womb he seized his brother's heel, and with his strength he strove with an angel. This text refers to the story known to us from Genesis 32, where Jacob wrestles with a mysterious individual at the Jabbok. The Masoretic text of Hosea 12:4 or 5, depending on your text, is the result of a dogmatic revision. Why do I say that? This text, as I've said, refers to the story known to us from Genesis 32, where Jacob wrestles with a mysterious individual at the Jabbok. Hosea is not an exact replica of the story, but a very puzzling account of that incident. Jacob's opponent is a divine being. The name Israel is a theophoric name, a name which embeds the name of a god, not a name of an angel, within a personal name. So it cannot be Israel because he fought an angel. He's not getting the name of an angel, no. He's getting a name of a god. That is what a theophoric name is. The Masoretes wished to avoid too great a closeness between Jacob and God, and so they inserted the word angel, malak. So this is what they did. They wrote, Vayaser el malak vayukal. He struggled with an angel and he had the upper hand. That is the Masoretic text interpretation or insertion. When we reconstruct it, we have Vayaser el vayukal, meaning El imposed himself and gained the upper hand. Who gained the upper hand? Jacob. El imposed himself and gained the upper hand. So this is what the name Israel would mean. It comes from the root rule, govern, command, impose oneself as master. So the name would mean, may El impose himself as master. Let him reign. Let him reign. Let him reign. Can I show anything in the biblical text that will suggest that? The Bible does attest some other proper names from the same root, such as Sariah, or the long form Sariyahu. Which is the name of a priest in 2 Kings and also an official of King Zedekiah in the book of Jeremiah. What does it mean? YHVH reigns. So Israel means, may El impose himself as master, let him reign. El is different from YHVH. They became merged together. We are talking about times when they were two separate entities. Would address how they came to be merged together, but they were never the same. This folk etymology, may El or may God combat, was able to supplant the original etymology at the moment when YHVH, a warrior god, became the patron god of the group Israel. But before then, Israel had El as their patron deity, and their name would have meant, may El impose himself as master. Let him reign.